Oh, hi everyone. A good day. I am Shivaram. I am a assistant professor at Woxsen University, a part of interior design department in School of Arts and Design. Today we'll be talking about the application of teaching frameworks in the context of barrier-free built environments, in creating some kind of empathy in students while doing the design exercise. So we at Woxin University have developed some frameworks which can be applied in the pedagogy to sensitize students with the empathy while designing barrier-free built environments. And quite often when we try and talk about barrier-free built environments, it is mostly physical in nature. But then beyond that, there are certain other barriers which is more like, social, economic, psychological, institutional barriers, which quite often we don't talk about. And when we also consider the kind of users, always the specially abled or disabled users are in the focus, beyond which, application of this barrier-free built environments to other users can also be sensitized through this framework. So the let us jump through the framework that we have tried, to use in our classrooms. Uh, so it has been derived from Benjamin Bloom's uh, five-step model. Basically, how Benjamin Bloom in 1950s has talked about the five-step model to evaluate the output from the students, which can be applied in this framework now. So if you see carefully, it will start with comprehending, to encounter, to recognize, evaluate, and regenerate. These are all the five steps that we have used. In the first step, it starts with understanding the barriers in the built environment, based on whatever literature that we have and the guidelines that we have made by certain policymakers of respective nation, or from global policies that we have from developed nations and developing nations. So this is just not to reinvent the standards and or the thoughts that have been in place, and adding to that, and also to question what these guidelines are and how these guidelines are like this. And in the second stage, when we talk about encounter, this is the key stage where the students or the learners are supposed to experience the barriers, to analyze and audit these barriers and special abilities or disabilities that the other users have. And then when we go to the next step, which is recognizing, which is the third step of the entire framework, which is more like identification and mapping of various barriers in the built environment, in which the students start identifying and applying the first two steps knowledge, and gain the knowledge that has been gained in the first two steps in the third step. And from there, we go to the fourth step, which is evaluation, which is the assessment of all these critical areas with the barriers in the built environment, to understand where is the problem or how complex the problems are in the built environment. And in the final stage, we come to regeneration, which is more cyclic in nature, recreating the spaces. If at all the entire exercise has to be done again, it will start from the comprehending, encounter, recognize, evaluate, and coming to the regeneration again. So we have tried to implement this framework at Woxin University. I just wanted to show you a glimpse of how we have tried using various tools and techniques. So the first stage, like we talked about, understanding what is there, the comprehend part, wherein the existing bylaws or the policies that we have, institutional policies that we have. So we try to study about the United Nations Enable, American Disability Act, National Building Code, New Fort standards, or UNICEF and CPWD standards and guidelines that we have in place for in the context of barrier-free built environments or otherwise universal design. And the students were supposed to analyze various components and then identify what are all the key components that have been addressed in all of these policies that are there, which have been built by the developed nations or developing nations. And so that the parameters or the key aspects or areas in which the students have to work, they will understand the baseline. Then from there, when we move to the second stage, which is very interesting now, wherein the tools like role play or experience, now come in to the picture, where students are supposed to go for real time experience. They have to blindfold themselves or use the wheelchair, you know and then there are certain special abilities or disabilities which cannot be experienced by using role play, such as partial blindness. So in such cases, what interestingly we have done is, bringing in the technology, which is virtual reality. By using virtual reality, how the users or the students can experience what the users would feel or how they perceive the world like. So there is this movie, Notes on Blindness, in VR, which is based on John Hull's experience of how he has slowly lost his vision. There is a beautiful narration on that in VR, which has been experienced by the students in the studio, just to understand more aspects towards how the partial blindness would feel like or experiencing that. So after all of this experience has been done, now students are more sensitized to what are all the standards. Now they are applying whatever they have studied in the standards or policies in the real time. Now comes the third stage, where identification, wherein there are a lot of points that now students have to do the auditing, and then put up all their mapping together, in which the first two stages, the knowledge that they have gained or the insights that they have gained in the first two steps, now they'll apply in the third step, which is in the recognition of all these barriers in the built environment. So now we have taken up a control built environment, which is the university setup divided into three parts, and we divided all the student groups into three groups, and they started identifying and mapping all of these barriers in the built environment. So the output, it looks like this, something like this, wherein there are multiple parameters and classifications of barriers that students have done, and they have identified and then mapped in the on the site plan. Right from problems like in handrails to signages or navigation systems, building information systems, windows, doors, switches. So both interior and exterior, both indoor and outdoor environments were understood. But then extensively, since the department is from interior design, the spatial design application or the entire exercise was in the context of interior design. So now we have all the points together of the barriers which have been identified by the student in the third step. And now the fourth step comes into understanding uh, the intensity of the problem or how critical the problem is, by doing the clustering of various points that are there. So when there are certain aspects such as from flooring, pathways, furniture, stairs, windows, and ramps, so there are certain number of points that have been identified. So based on directly proportional, the intensity of the problem is directly proportional to the number of points that have been identified in the built environment, with which the clustering has happened and the intensity of the problem has been understood, and then certain areas have been frozen, in which the students chose the priority. Like it is really important to work in the area where there are more problems and more complexity in the entire analysis that they have done, with which they are converging into choosing certain spaces where they have to work. So some of the outputs were these, this is like the fifth stage, where it is coming towards the regeneration part, in which there are again certain steps which are involved. Then they talk about the user persona. They take up certain personas. They, based on the experience that they have, they look at the activity mapping, user activity mapping with respect to the space, with respect to the time, and then see, understand what all are the areas that they can work extensively, which are critical and important, and then they start designing. uh, this is an example of cafeteria and a commercial area or office spaces in the institution. Apart from them, some of the interesting areas that were identified by the students are how classrooms should also be inclusive. So some of the ideas were there, like how can we make, from literally making them, changing the furniture, to maybe looking at these spaces, special components such as doors, windows, which need to be accessible, like the switchboards, table, chair, the furniture aspect. So all of these have been done by the students. Then we tried to move from controlled environment to something which is more, kind of a real time. So since Woxen is, located in a context of rural areas, so we had the opportunity to visit certain Anganwadis nearby in the village. So after doing the primary studies by the students in these respective village, they came back and now they had to work on, spaces which are, user centric, which are child centric spaces. So Anganwadis typically they provide services or spaces for 0 to 6 years predominantly, and there is a particular goal for the entire Anganwadi network that they have. They have certain play activities that are there. They have food that is being served. So there are multiple activities in that space, which should be more interesting to the kids. So now the students started ideating certain themes, such as some of the students talked about abhiruddhi, like, and then they gave certain ideations. Uh, Most predominantly things were focusing on the scale here because of the user that we are focusing on is a child. So all the elements were again, redesigned based on the scale that is required. And the interesting elements of color uh, is to be added and make the space more interesting. And there were other certain, interventions the students have done, uh, like, read using the local materials that are available, and then also, making these entrances or the exits of that space more interesting, like incorporating slides to them, and also responding to the climate. So all these strategies have been also incorporated. So and also in some of the cases, students have also utilized the spaces beyond indoor spaces, coming to the outdoor and the roof part of the school or of the built environment. So that's how I think I will end the presentation with introducing the entire framework of 5-step model that we have been practicing in Voxer. And now we are moving to the stage 2, where we are trying to apply this framework and connect it with the Maslow's needs, and then trying to classify where the built environments can be handled. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Ethos India, and all the organizations and all the people who have given this chance for me to present this.